welcome back to Jacey's Creek. My name's Emily, I'm your host, and this is a podcast where we go episode by episode, scene by scene of Pacey and Joey. And one of the reasons why we do this is so that way later in the podcast we can go, oh, so that's where we got this from, and this is where we got this from. And for example, the last episode we had Mitch find out that, or not really find out, but kind of like go, why do you care so much, while Pacey was freaking about B&B. And I said, well, this is kind of the only person that really sees that, but then we realized that Jen saw that. So these are kind of the emotions of what it's like to revisit the podcast, or revisit the show, Dawson's Creek, but only focus on Pacey and Joey and no one else. We don't focus on Dawson's scenes, we don't focus on Jen's scenes, we don't focus on Andy's scenes unless they come with Pacey and Joey, which it's kind of fun if you really think about it, if you only skip like the scenes that you actually like, but then sometimes it's confusing because you're like, wait, was I supposed to watch this scene to understand this scene? And it kind of makes me like Dawson less whenever I see him in Pacey and Joey scenes. But it also kind of makes me understand him a little bit more. So that's the moral of the story of why we go over this, like, whole thing. So today we are on episode 13, Northern Lights. And if you have not already, make sure to click that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And make sure to check out my Instagram, that's Witter and Potter, and my TikTok, Pacey and Joey. And as far as I know, this comes out on January 24th, 2000. May be completely wrong, but forgive me if I am. So the first scene that we have is scene 1 of Pacey and Joey. Yay! The whole part of this podcast is finally coming to the beginning. So we're in Joey's house, and Pacey and Joey are there, and they're going through lines of his play that he has, which we kind of see, but we kind of don't see. We haven't seen since episode 11 of this season. So Pacey says, tomorrow night will be your night. We'll do whatever you want. And Joey says something loud and insane and crazy. And Pacey says, I promise. And Joey says, like what? And Pacey says, like, I'll come home from work early and we'll wallpaper each other. And I love Joey's response to this, because she goes, no way. Sorry, we're done. And Pacey says, we can't stop now. I don't know this stuff at all. And Joey says, sorry, Master Theron. But the whole next page consists solely of cooing, tickling, and sit-lapping. 3 things definitely not in my range as an actress. First of all, I love how Joey is going through Pacey's line and helping him out. I personally have done this, and it is a little bit awkward when it comes to like things where it's like talking about like kissing or whatever, and I'm like, I'm over this. But like, I love how Pacey asked her, and in return they kind of have to like do the B&B. Like, he probably has to help her with the B&B and get all that stuff done. And I love also how he says, I'll come home from work early. Like, Pacey, you're like 16, but whatever. 16, 17. And so Pacey says, okay, let me tell you, you are going to be sorry tomorrow night when I get up on that stage, panic, and draw a complete line, and then just start apple-lipping the sessions to the crowd. And Joey says, actually, Pacey, I kind of thought I'd go on Saturday. And Pacey looks so hurt when he realized what she just said. And he goes, Saturday? And Joey says, yeah. And Pacey says, no. You don't want to come Saturday. You want to come Friday. It's opening night. Much better chance you'll get to witness some amusing disaster. You know, like a scenery falling on my head, or perhaps my co-star hyperventilating from one of the intoxicating kiss scenes. And Joey says, yeah, you know, one of those. Which is kind of fun. funny when you really think about it. Like, she was kind of talking about his kisses when you really think about it. Like, Joey, yeah, you know one of those. Like, yeah, he does, and you know it. And one of my favorite parts about this scene is the fact that he's kind of like breaking out about how she's not going to come Saturday night. And it continues by him saying, so what do you say? Front row center? And Joey says, I can't. I kind of have this thing I have to do on Friday night. And Pacey says, what thing? I love this part of the scene. And she goes, it's just this thing. And it's kind of obvious that she doesn't want to tell him. Because she, instead of saying, I have this thing with AJ, she goes, I have this thing with, like, this guy. And Pacey goes, what guy? And he just looks the way he says it. And she smiles and goes, AJ. And he goes, college guy? Which is my favorite line. I think this is, I always say this, but this is probably one of my favorite episodes with them in it, because I just love how he goes, what thing? What guy? College guy? Like, he's not that old in my opinion. He's only a year older than her, or 2 years. And Joey says he's coming out he's coming out to the Cape for a party, and he invited me to go with him. And Pacey says, you're going to a frat party? And Joey says he's not that kind of college guy. A party, and he invited me to go with him. Oh, no, sorry. He's not that type of college guy, Pacey. Have you ever heard of that Barrows? I have no idea. And Pacey says the Northern Lights. And Joey says yes. And Pacey says, yeah, I heard of them. I mean, I may not be Ivy League material, but if you want to give me a roadmap and a remote control, I can find my way to Discovery Channel and back. And Joey says, yeah, well, there's like 10 nights of the year when you can actually see the northern lights from this part of the world. And tomorrow night may be one of them, which I only seen the solar, or so it's called, the solar eclipse, where like it will blind you if you look at it or something. I don't know, maybe blind since then. That's the only thing I've really seen that like has made a difference in my life. And I'm like, wow, and I don't really care anymore. And so Pacey is obviously upset about this. Like, he's like, I don't care. But Joey continues by saying, and if you factor some sunspot activity, and Pacey says, Northern Lights, my ass. This guy is obviously trying to separate you from the Pottons. And Joey says, Pacey, read a newspaper once in a while. You can't fake geographic activities. And Pacey says, oh yeah, you sure can. You can fake anything, especially if you want a Ivy League egghead and the best part of some grand man's makeout scheme. I'm talking as the voice of reason here, okay? I mean, come on. The chances of the northern lights appearing in the the night sky above Cape Side are about as good as the chances of including myself as a director on Saturday night on stage tomorrow night. And Joey says, yeah, well, call me crazy, but I'll take the odds on any day. And Pacey is just so upset that she's not going to come to his show, and you can just see it on his face. Like, it's not one of those things where, like, he's just upset to be upset. Like, it is one of those things where he just looks generally upset because he worked so hard and he wants her to see and be proud of him. And instead, she's going with AJ, aka college guy, to see if, or aka Ivy League egghead, to see, like, the Northern Lights. And he's like, if you want to see the Northern Lights, you can easily go on Discovery Channel. Instead, why don't you just go to my play instead? But one thing I do like about this scene is he doesn't automatically get on to her about it. Like, he doesn't yell at her, he doesn't scream at her. He just, like, you can see, like, him processing the information But that's one of the reasons why we love Pacey so much, is that he's upset, but like it's a different kind of upset. And obviously from season 3 to season 4 a lot will change. But I generally think that has always been Pacey. Like he takes a minute to process things, and then it like goes, okay, I can talk now. So then we have scene 1 of Joey. And they're outside of the school, and Joey and Dawson are walking along the sidewalk talking to each other. And Dawson says, "So what do you think?" And Joey says, "What do I think?" And Dawson says, "Yeah." And Joey says, "I think you're going to be pretty bored in study hall, Dawson." And Dawson says, "Well, it can be a very interesting opportunity to study some human behavior, at least until I figure out what my move is going to be." And Joey says, "Just don't go join the yearbook or something, okay? I mean, it's bad enough that Pacey's doing the whole play thing." And it's kind of sad that she says that. Like, yeah, Pacey's joining, like, that whole play. But it's kind of something, like, Joey should have known, like, that's something that Pacey really, really enjoys and wants to enjoy and wants to be out there. And she's kind of, like, over here, like, it's bad enough that Pacey's doing this play thing. Like, okay, Joey, whatever. And she continues or Dawson says, "Yeah, that's right, tomorrow's opening night, isn't it?" And Joey says, "Yeah." And then Nikki comes storming up, and she's like, "You dropped out of film class, are you insane?" And Joey's like, I'm gone. Like, good luck. And Pacey's like, "Thanks." So there's like a whole thing that Dawson was dropping out of film, and that's why Joey was like, "You're kind of crazy." And so then we have scene 1 of Pacey. And Pacey and his leading actress are trying to run some lines at the set of the play. And Andy is running wild in the background and because of anxiety. And the actress says, "How are we supposed to go up tonight if you keep forgetting your lines?" And Pacey says, "I know the lines, okay? It's just, I got a little bit of the delay, that's all." And Andy says, "Where's Mr. Boothrick? Our play is falling apart at the seams." And she goes, "Pacey, just take it from the top." And Pacey's just like, "Sure thing, boss." But I think it's just the fact that he knows Joey's not going to be there. And he's been running lines with Joey the whole time. But it's kind of sad that like he has little time to prepare, and now like he has to like have so much pressure with him. And everyone's like, "Why aren't you doing this correct?" And I think that's just like, goes back to number 2, where Pacey is always screwing up. But who honestly cares? Like, it's just one of those things that he just does. And it's not a bad thing. Like, I think we all do it. And so Pacey says, "Sure thing, boss. What's the top again?" And Andy says, Your entry." And Pacey says, "Entry, right." And Jack says, "Hey, Andy." And Andy says, "Not now, Jack. We're trying to run lines." And Pacey has conveniently chosen to leave his memory at home. And Jack says, "Yeah, well, in about 30 minutes ago in English class, Mr. Brookwood." And Andy says, "What?" And Andy says, Jack says, "Just come. And Mr. Brookwood, like, was very ill. So then we have scene 2 of Pacey and Joey. And if you know this scene, you know the scene where Pacey pushes Bessie out of the door. So we're going to get into that. So they're in Joey's bedroom, and Bessie and Joey are sitting and talking on the bed. And Joey says, "Don't think about coming near me with the Minutes Tourist device." And there's a knock on the door. And Joey says, "That can't be him." And Bessie says, "Just relax, got Bo to get it, and finish telling me how I'm not supposed to worry about you going with some much older guy." Which, again, I don't think he's much older. If he's a freshman in college, I think he must be like 19 at least, which is kind of a little bit older, I guess, but I don't really know. And so Joey says, "He's not that older, Bessie. He's like 19, which, I'm sorry. And so there's a knock on the door, on the bedroom door, and Bessie opens it to see Pacey at it. And she slams the door in his face. And Pacey says, well, it's a boy, just not the boy we expected, which is my favorite line from Pacey. I don't know why. It's just the way she, like, kind of smiles at Joey, like, not the boy we expected. And she opens the door and lets him in and then leaves. And Pacey says, okay, so I tanked it. I did. I completely tanked it. And Joey's like, calm down, Pacey. You're just nervous. And Pacey says, oh, no. This is way beyond nervous. Do you know that read-through I had today? I couldn't remember a single line. And Joey says, I don't know why you're so psyching yourself out like this. You know the play, Pacey. We went through it 2 nights ago. And Pacey says, no, I know the play when I'm running it with you. When I got to do it with an actual mean man being nothing. Which is kind of sweet when you think about it. He's like, it's different with you. Like, that's kind of what he's saying. Like, it's different when I'm with you because I remember it. And I feel like it's just how Joey says it. Like, she kind of remembers it and stuff. But, like, also, I really do like how Pacey was like, I don't got this. I don't got it when I'm with you. Like, I got it when I'm with you, but not when I'm actually with you man beings. And Joey says, I know I suck for not being there. I'm sorry. And Pacey says, you do suck for not going, don't you? But listen, I'm going to give you the opportunity to get back in my good books, okay? There's an after party I told you about, and now I don't say no too quickly because he's definitely going to need a good shoulder to cry on after this whole normal life distant thing wasn't work out. Can I just clap for Pacey right there? Because that is actually kind of funny. He's like, hey, this thing doesn't work out. Like, you can come to the after party, you can cry on my shoulder. Like, I hope you're the big fan right there. Which later in the season we'll definitely see her cry on his shoulder, but like, it's just kind of funny, like, you know what I mean? And so Joey says, okay, I'll try, but don't count on it, alright? Current geographic conditions are extremely favorable for the autumn activity, naturally. Pacey says, where does this science mumbo jumbo come from? I thought this AJ Dye was a poetry geek. Like, it's obvious that Pacey does not like AJ. And with the scene, like, before Pacey really comes in, like, with Bessie and Joey, like, Bessie's like, why should I let you with this, like, 19-year-old? And Joey's like, he's obviously not that old. Like, really, he's not. Like, it's just a couple years older. Like, I think, like, 3 years max, like, that's okay. But, like, anything older than 3, but, like, you're kind of, like, in a whole different thing also in high school and college. Like, high school, you're finding out so many things about yourself, and you're finding, like, who you are as a person. Half the time you can't even drive. And as a college student, you can drive, you can go anywhere you want. And so it's kind of hard for those two things to really, like, pick up, you know what I mean? And so when Bessie was talking about that, like, she was obviously not really happy about his age, and Pacey's just over here not happy that she's going out with anyone. And I think this is the first time that we really see a lot of jealousy coming from Pacey, because there really, like, besides Dawson, there really hasn't been anyone else besides Dawson and Joey's love life and Jack. And obviously, Pacey was a little bit jealous with Dawson. We have seen that before. But we never saw him jealous with Jack. And with this, it's kind of like the first time we really see him, like, actively jealous. And Joey says he's interested in more than that. He's a represented man. And Pacey says, fantastic. He can board you in 7 languages. And Joey says, no, just 3 actually. English, French, and Latin. And this scene makes me laugh every time. He goes, Latin? And Joey goes, mm-hmm. And Pacey goes, who speaks Latin? I mean, like, Spanish now? That's the foreign language of people. But Latin, that's a dead language. And actually, it's kind of funny that he said Latin, because my brother used to speak Latin, and we all used to make fun of him for it. And so Bessie opens the door, and she goes, he's here, and Pacey just slams the door in his face, and Joe goes, okay, it's not too late. Like, we can call this off, you know. And he's like, the first thing he's gonna do when he comes through that door is he gonna make some lame compliment about how incredible you look tonight. And Joey looks annoyed, but it's true. Like, she does look incredible. Like, she has her curly hair, and she looks amazing. And she has like a blue shirt, like a light blue shirt that looks absolutely gorgeous on her. And she has a little bit of makeup. Like, she doesn't look bad at all. And Pacey's like, even though you look incredible, like, he's gonna make that lame excuse about it. And so they leave the room and walk into the living room. And Joey says, Pacey. And Pacey says, I'm looking out for you. And he's gonna make something cute, like a not negotiable, not entirely insignificant about your physical contract. You know what I mean? Like, helping you with your coat. And Joey says, it's called being a gentleman, Pacey. I'm surprised you ever heard of it. Which, we know that Pacey's a gentleman, but, like, I think this is a mixture of, like, insecurity and, like, number 3, where he calls them lovey-dovey, because he is kind of being, like, very jealous, and Joey's not really seeing it because she's kind of dense sometimes. And Pacey says, and this party he's supposed to be taking you, I bet it doesn't even exist. And I bet it does exist, that way some money that our boy wonders that he'll be there seizing the first possible opportunity to get you alone. And she stops in the living room and she commands him like a dog, stay. And she leaves Pacey in the hallway and goes to meet AJ. And we just see Pacey looking completely sad, where AJ and Joey are greeting each other with hey, and AJ says you look amazing. And you can just tell that Pacey wants this to be him. And it is so obvious from the way that he looks at her. It's not about, like, how jealous he is. He just knows in his heart, like, he wants to be that guy. To greet her at the door, take her on a date, and enjoy their company. Like, it's one of those scenes. Like, he doesn't really care about AJ. It isn't about AJ at all. It's about Joey and how he wants to be that guy. And Joey, like, gets her coat, and AJ helps him. AJ helps her, and she thanks him, and Pacey just looks so sad. So then we have the next scene of Joey. So after we see Pacey incredibly jealous, we finally get to see kind of Joey alone. And so there's a scene outside the party where Joey and AJ are walking in the front water talking. Joey says, hey, thank you. So who are these people? And AJ say, well, the guy who owns this place is a mathematic. Once upon a time, he was my mentor. And Joey says, and everyone else? And AJ says, grad students mostly. Some of my scientists and other leading biologically. Sometimes I cannot pronounce these words. Economics. Can't you tell? And Joey says, and how could I tell? And AJ says, well, the treat's haircut's an unfortunate fashion sense. And he takes a sip of his drink and then spits it out. And he says, and the fragrance, taste, and beverage, it's mint. It's a whole boardwalk drink before he slants kind of. Just a very bad joke. Where is that book from? I forgot where that book is from. I think it's Macbeth. And Joey goes to sip, and he stops her, and he pours hers out as well. And he says, you know, I want it. And Joey says, I can't have some. And AJ goes, no, it's alcoholic. And Joey says, but it's like to live at college students. And AJ goes, what? Opportunities to get his high school girlfriend all liquored up. And AJ goes, well, only one leads to a very little imagination. He says, alcoholic isn't the most alcoholic isn't the most subtle way to seduce a girl. I mean, there are better ways to get it. Not that we or anything. I mean, it's just very awkward. Like, have you ever been on a date and you, like, say something wrong? Like, one time I was on a date and I said, like, sometimes I just drop my pennies, but he thought I said panties. that was awkward. So it was just one of those things where you don't want to say the wrong thing, and then when you do, it's just like you have to make excuses, but then the other person has to like be the bigger person. And Joey's the bigger person by saying, "Where is everyone going?" And AJ says, "Cloud over, viewing conditions aren't exactly clear." And Joey says, "Does that mean no lights?" And AJ says, "No, not necessarily. It could clear out before midnight." And Joey says, "Midnight?" And AJ say, "Yeah, for some unknown reason, midnight and National Midnight, to be exact, is the best time for the viewing display." And Joey says, "So that means we have quite a store for us." And AJ says, "You're not going to turn into a punk noon if I don't get you home late, are you?" And Joey says, "No, I might freeze to death, so maybe we should go inside and mingle with those astronauts." And AJ says, "Let's take a walk first. Do you want to?" And Joey says, "Sure." So it's kind of like one of those things where Joey is going to miss Pacey's after party, which is kind of sad when you think about it. Like, I think she could have been the bigger person and been like, "Hey, I know we have plans, but why don't we do this and then come back?" Like, that would have been kind of cool, but of course Joey would never do that. And then we have the next scene, which is scene 2 of Pacey. And this scene is where they're outside the theater and Jack is handing a playbills at the door, and Dawson gets one of the bills when Annie comes walking up. And he says, "Oh, Dawson, there you are. Where's Pacey?" And Pacey says, Dawson says, "As his director, shouldn't you be better than I do?" And Annie says, "Oh," and Jack says, "What's going on?" And Annie says, "Well, it's only 20 minutes till curtain call, and my lead is nowhere to be found." And Jack says, "I could have sworn I saw him earlier." And Annie says, "Okay, he's got to be around here somewhere." And Dawson is like, "I'll look for him." And Annie says, "Okay, Dawson, don't look, just fine, please. And tell him not to worry, I'm not going to kill him till after the show." And then we have this scene where Pacey is like dribbling some basketballs while Dawson walks in as he makes a shot, and Dawson begins to clap. And Pacey's like, "How'd you find me?" And Dawson says, "I have misfortune of knowing how your brain works." Which, okay. But also I do like how Dawson does know where Pacey's gonna be, no matter where it is. Like, I feel like whenever Pacey is like this, Dawson's always the one to find him. And so Pacey says, "Yeah, I seem to recall the last time you and I were on a basketball court together, I ended up getting my nose broken, didn't I?" And that refers back to season 1, episode 7, where Dawson was kind of jealous and he just threw a basketball at his nose. I think Pacey's kind of scared that will happen again because of Joey. And Dawson says, "Pacey, we don't have time for this. You got a show to do." And Pacey says, "Oh, just a couple more, it helps. It's part of the whole acting process." And Dawson says, "So are you nervous about this? It's not like you ever acted before." And Pacey says, "Yeah, how many times did it take to actually get that sea creature thing right?" And Dawson says, "Good point." Which, it goes back to season 1, episode 1, where you see him, like, flipping. Remember when he, like, flipped Pacey, like, or Joey over in the chair? And she goes, "You grabbed my ass." And I was like, it kind of goes back to that. And Dawson says, "Good point," and Pacey says, "And that point, how many people were watching me? And as a matter of fact, how many ex-girlfriends were there, counting on me to do a good job?" And Dawson says, "Let me ask you this. Acting, you like it. You're having fun." And Pacey says, "Well, I got blackmailed into this whole thing, but yeah, I say it's actually fun. Actually, it's been a blast." And Dawson says, "So you go on stage tonight and have a blast. It's all that matters, man. Find what you love and do it." And Pacey says, "This is coming from a guy who just gave up his life passion to hang out with them cheapers in 4th period in study hall, right?" And Dawson says, "I didn't give up. I decided to spread it out around a little bit." And Pacey says, "When did you get all thin? I thought all the people would be freaking out big time right now." And Dawson says, "Well, sorry. He says, I thought you would be all the one that was freaking out right now. And Dawson says, why? And Pacey says, well, I don't know. Maybe it's because Joey's on that big date with college guy. And Dawson says, I really suck at this game. Which, it's kind of funny that, like, either, like, Dawson really didn't care about her moving on. Like, he says, like, oh, like, you're the love of my life, like, da 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 da. And he doesn't really care that Joey's out. And Dawson says, alright, come on, Oliver, your public awaits. And Pacey says, what if this guy is some big sex maniac? And to respond with, you know, what Pacey just said about Joey is, Joey's a big girl. I'm sure she can take care of herself. Like, for someone who, like, fights over Joey and a couple, like in 5 episodes from now, he doesn't really seem like someone who really cares. Like, they make this big deal about how much he cares about Joey and la-di-da-di-da. And now he's over here like, Joey can take care of herself. Like, what? Like, why are you not making such a big deal about this? And Pacey responds back with, take care of herself. That's all you gotta say about this? We're talking about Josephine Potter, the one who's Destiny and Quinn steers, and Dawson says, had to happen eventually. You said that yourself. Let's go. And Pacey says, oh please, oh please, oh please. Which, if you really look at the scene, like, he's not really upset about, like, the play. He's really upset about Joey. Like, Joey not being there and Joey not being able to support him. And it kind of goes back to the play, obviously. Sorry, my allergies are now acting up in the middle of this episode, but it kind of goes back to the play, where he's freaking about the play, but also he's freaking out because Joey's not there. And he does it right when Joey's there, however, he doesn't do it right when Joey's not there. And he's kind of nervous about, like, how Joey is, like, going out with this guy who he doesn't really know, and he doesn't know if she's safe or not. Like, it is that, but also he's kind of jealous about it, too. And so when Dawson just kind of, like, shrugs it off, like, that's not really a Dawson characteristic. I mean, like, if he's putting film, like, that's also not a Dawson thing. We see that, like, what, 2 times? And when something doesn't go his way, he just quits. Which, me too, Dawson, but at the same time, like, okay. And so, there's also, like, another part of this scene where I want to point out, like, it's the fact that, like, Pacey's the only one concerned about Joey. Besides Bessie, obviously. Like, Bessie was concerned about, like, Joey and how everything was gonna work out. But, like, the main person that was concerned, and between Dawson and Pacey, was Pacey. Like, no one else. Why is that? Like, they make such a big deal about Dawson being her destiny, and even Pacey says it, like, destiny and flower linked to yours. And Dawson feels it had to happen eventually. But, like, whenever Pacey does something, like, suddenly Dawson's like, oh, I want that, actually. Like, okay, well, whatever. So it's kind of, like, proof that whenever Pacey does something to make Dawson mad, he goes after Joey. But whenever, like, Joey finds someone else, he's not that mad. Like, why is that? And so then we have the next scene of Pacey, which is scene 3 of Pacey. And he is on the stage, going on the backstage, and the actor says, so how long did you say you were married? And the actor says 6 days, which reminds me of 6 seconds. 6 seconds. And the actor says, he wouldn't notice the place is empty till June. Well, out of 1581 has a nice marriage. And Andy says, Dawn, we got to get you buttoned. Okay, look right. Don't be nervous. And Pacey says, Andy. And Andy says, Pacey, no. How could you do this to me? I sent you understudy into makeup 15 minutes ago. And Pacey says, that's good. I think you should stay there, because, Andy, I can't do this. And Andy says, what? You can't. Come here. You know what? I gave up on knowing this word for a long time ago. So you just gotta get up there with the general gist, and you're gonna be fine, okay? Come on, let's go. Go, you're up. And Pacey's like, I don't know. And Andy says, come on. she goes, oh wait, no, the suitcase. Okay, go. And I love how Andy's the one that has to support him. And even Pacey said earlier, like, this isn't a thing where, like, the ex is out there and all of a sudden. But he's, like, really, really nervous. And he goes out there. And he is about to, like, say something else. But he's out of breath as he says, it's 6 flights. Did you know it's that 6 flights? And the actress says, it isn't. It's 5. And Pacey says, what about the big thing hanging? And we can just tell that Pacey is doing a good job. And Andy's, like, kind of giving a look. Meanwhile, there is scene 3 of Joey, where Joey is alone with AJ, and she says, so you're having that thing vote for me. And AJ says, I'm just saying I wouldn't let my family finance limit my dream. You know, think about when you go to Ivy League school. And he says, you think you want to go to Ivy League school? And Joey says, I don't know. I think that if I don't try, then I'll always wonder. And AJ says, wonder what? And Joey says, well, if I'm good enough, smart enough to do something really important in my life. And AJ says, you sound pretty driven. And Joey says, yeah, driven by fear of failure. Which I feel like that's kind of what Pacey and Joey have in common with this episode. Like, they're both scared that they're not going to do something right and they're not going to, like, be able to succeed in it. And I feel like that's kind of the common thing that's happening with this episode, because there's always one thing that's going on. And so AJ says, you know, I think maybe sometimes that happens to girls who lost their mother when they're really young. They're driven to success. And Joey says, like Madonna. And AJ says, well, I was thinking more along the lines of brother and sisters, but... And Joey says, for a while I thought I liked art. And AJ says, but you don't anymore. And Joey says, no, I do. I don't know. It's like this person that you want others for, you know, and you make them happy and you make them proud, and then you're yourself. And sometimes it's really hard to where one ends and when others begin. Does that make sense? And AJ says, yeah, completely. You know, and then it's Europe. They used to do Northern Lights for spirits of the dead warriors. And Joey says, and now? And AJ says, well, no. Now we know that they change particles into the sun, interacting with the Earth upper atmosphere, which is kind of boring. Like, okay, like AJ, no one cares, but alright. Like, to me, AJ is the most boring person on the show sometimes. I'm like, what are you, besides Dawson, like, what are you even saying? Like, Dawson may be the most dramatic, Pacey is like my spirit guy, and Joey, like, can be a perfectionist along with Andy, but then Jack is just this funny gay guy. I hate saying that, but it's kind of true. And then, is there anyone else? Graham's is like the boring grandma, like, but kind of funny and scary. And Jen is just this wild girl, and Bessie is like Joey's guardian, and just Pacey's brother. So then we have him continuing along with this, and Joey says charged particles not too romantic. And Joey says think about it from particles' point of view. Infinite, unexplainable, drawn to something unresistible, and he goes in for a kiss, and Joey says, I just remembered that I'm supposed to meet someone. And AJ says no, and Joey says, yeah, can we go? And AJ says, yeah, sure. And Joey says, yeah. But I wondered why suddenly she thought about Pacey when he was going in for a kiss. Like, okay, Joey, like, I see you thinking about Pacey when you're thinking about this. Like, she's kind of bored of him. Like, I think that's why she thought about Pacey. And it's just kind of funny to me because this whole episode goes back to Joey thinking about Pacey and Pacey thinking about Joey. So then we have scene 4 of Pacey where he is acting and he is standing on the tall, like, windowsill and the play is going on. And Pacey says, I'll come when you say it again, loud and clear. And the actress says, what? Anything, Paul? And Paul says, Paul Brunner. And the actress says, Paul Brunner. raising young authority, and the actress calls raising young authority. Pacey says it's a lazy, stinking drunk, and the actress says it's a lazy, stinking drunk, and I love him. And Pacey is acting. He says, I love you too, Corey. I mean, even if I don't like your TV, I loved you. And the actress says, then please come down, darling, please. And Andy just seems very proud of him. And so then we go to the next part of the scene, where scene 5 of Pacey, where it's the after party, and Jen goes to Pacey, and Jen says, hey, good looking, and Pacey says, now you better watch out. I think Grams is moving in on your date. And Jen says, and I think that you stick to comedy, that's scripted. And Pacey says, fair enough, thanks for coming tonight. And Jen says, wanna have this done for the world. Opening night, packed night. And Pacey says, and not a Witter in attendance. Surprise that Dawson's there. And Jen says, yeah, I saw him. And Pacey says, and Jack? And Jen goes, that he is. And Pacey says, of course you. And Jen goes, yes, I am. And Pacey says, yes. And Jen says, but you know who's not here? And Pacey says, the critical Cape Side clone. And Jen says, Joey. And Pacey says, yeah, well, she couldn't make it, big day. And Jen says, it's too bad. She missed a great show and an incredible leading man. And Pacey says, well, thank you very much. And Jen says, of course, you hardly notice. And Pacey says, hardly. Barely missed her. And you know who's right behind him when he says that? And who goes, missed you? And it's Joey. And she looks incredible, not gonna lie. And he goes, nobody. Which, I do like that, because you can just tell that, like, he missed her and he wanted her there, but she wasn't there. But then all of a sudden, she knew that this after party was very important to him, so she came. And that's, like, part of my favorite thing about her, is that she just, like, comes in when he needs her. Even though she missed, like, the opening night in some parts, but she really did do a good job at coming back. And so then we have scene 3 of Joey and Pacey, and they're at the bar, and Joey says, so, you're a huge hit. See, I told you everything would work out, Pacey. And Pacey says, what are you doing here? Prince Man bailed on you? And Joey says, no, it was that it was getting late and the clouds were moving in, and once it overcast, there was really no chance of seeing the northern lights from this latitude. And plus, it's getting cold, so we decided that, and Pacey interrupts her by saying, he kissed you, didn't he? And Joe goes, what makes you say that? And Pacey says, he's a moron not to, and there's lipstick smeared all over your face. I don't know why that scene always makes me, like, I don't know whether laugh or kind of sad, because I kind of feel bad for Pacey in this scene. And Joey says, that's what I get for letting Bessie talk me into a berry, I guess. And Pacey says, so are you going to see this guy again? And Joey says, I don't know. I mean, what's the point? I mean, he's older than me, he's smarter than me, and he lives far away. I'm very not in similar problems, seeing as I can't even drive yet. See, this is what I was talking about earlier. Like, high school and college students are such a big difference. Like, some can't even drive in high school. Like, there's a lot of things going on. Half the time, college students are, like, everywhere. And so, therefore, like, it's kind of hard for a person to really, like, get out there and date, like, a college student. Even though they're probably 3 years older than you. And it's just kind of weird, like, how young they can be. And so, Joey continues by saying, how can I ever feel the way that I, and Pacey says, feel about Dawson? And Joey says, I was gonna say, felt. Which we can kind of tell that, like, Joey's finally kind of over him. And whether she was, like, into Pacey at this point, like, you can tell, like, this was different than all the previous episodes where, like, she feels about Dawson. And Pacey says, want to know something, Miss Josephine Potter? I think the world may just surprise you yet. I mean, you fall in love and it doesn't work out. And you think it'll never happen again, but it does. Believe me, it does. In the strangest, places. And he was talking about Joey in that. I'm going to repeat myself when I say that. So he says, "You want to know something, Miss Josephine Potter? I think the world may just surprise you. Yet, I mean, you fall in love and it doesn't work out." Okay, he's talking about Andy. "And you think that it will never happen again, but it does." Okay, he's talking about Joey. Which, that's kind of like proving my point from earlier. I was saying, like, Pacey, like, throughout this, like, whole season, I've been saying, like, Pacey and Joey, like, they were finally at the point where they could, like, sit down and talk about, like, things that were really working out for them. And they could, like, they had rebounds, like, aka AJ was her rebound, and Jen was Pacey's rebound, and Andy was his old love, Pacey's old love, and Dawson was Joey's old love, and the two new lovers are standing right in front of each other, and Pacey really, really cares about Joey, and Joey, like, is kind of, like, dense about her feelings, because she's kind of scared about her feelings half the time. And so when you put those two things together, that's what Pacey really meant. And so Joey says, "What makes you such an expert, Pacey?" And Pacey says, "Well, I'm an actor. You know, a poor player, struggling and family, and all the rest of the Shakespeare stuff. And such of my job is the someone's inner working of the human heart." And Joey says, "I think I liked you better when you were throwing in defense." And Pacey looks over Joey's shoulder and noticed AJ has walked in and is looking around, and Pacey says, "Uh-oh," and Joey says, "What?" And Pacey says, "I think your date may not be so over after all." "Go on, you know you want to." And then Joey says, "Okay, thanks." And he has to let her go, which is kind of sad. When you love someone, you kind of have to let them go for a little bit because you have to figure out how you feel, and I think at such a young age that Pacey and Joey were in, it kind of made sense that they had to, like, let each other go. And they were in high school. Like, it makes sense that they're gonna move on. Like, your high school lover, if you're married to your high school sweetheart, do not take this the wrong way. But, like, when you're high school lovers, sometimes you just have to, like, find your way back to each other. Like, I heard this podcaster one time, they were talking about their love. And they were talking on about how when they were in high school, they were together for like a year or two. And then when they got into college, things happened, like they broke up, but they found each other again. And I feel like that's kind of how Pacey and Joey are. And it's just like certain things work out and other things don't work out. Like, for example, like both of my aunts and uncles, like they were high school sweethearts, they worked out together. Like, but like there are certain people and I'm sure there were certain people in my life that were high school sweetheart, like my grandma and my grandpa, like they didn't work out. Like, those were two things and they were high school sweethearts. Like, some things work out and other things don't work out. Like, things happen, life happens, like life changes. And I think that's kind of the moral of Pacey and Joey's story. So then we have scene 4 of Joey. And AJ and her are talking to each other, and Joey says, "What made you come back?" And AJ says, "I never left. Since I dropped you off, I've been sitting in the parking lot thinking about how when someone says something you don't understand, you suddenly faced with the rather limited window of opportunities in which you can ask that person what they meant, or the rest of their life pretending you understood them. I just thought I'd reopen the window. Did I do something wrong?" And Joey says, "No, AJ, I kind of panicked. And you know that thing called grace under pressure? Well, I don't really have it. Not a single smudge." And AJ said, "Joey, it was a kiss. It wasn't running up the bowls and tournaments." Why does he always pick the boring stuff? Like, why do you say that? And Joey says, "When you kissed me, I suddenly realized that I was standing there with this person who, you know, has skipped a set of grades and knows everything about everything. And I knew the minute you stopped kissing me, you would realize that you made a terrible mistake because," and AJ says, "Because why?" And AJ said, and Joey says, most things that you talked about, I don't even know what they are." Me too, Joey, me too. video, but he doesn't talk about like Einstein stuff. Like, it's just little stuff that like is just geeky. Like, it's not like interesting at all. Like, that's kind of how I took AJ. And so she continues by saying that things like literature and science and history just pour out of your mouth like you're this good, willing, hunting investor, and it's these things that are not of authority on. And AJ says, girls, beautiful girls, their hopes, their dreams, what makes them tick. I wish I knew a little bit more about that. And Joey says, me too. You know, more than that thing you do think you do. And AJ says, so I guess we never got to see them, the Northern Lights. And Joey says, no, next time. And AJ says, I've seen them before. And Joey says, well, will you tell me about them? And AJ says, it's this guy you know your whole life. The one you look at every night as a kid. Only you look up at it and it's on fire, floated with things in brilliant colors. And Joey says, sounds kind of scary. And AJ says, yeah, it is, but it's beautiful. So in this scene, like, it kind of sounds like she wants someone who is like a little bit less smart and a little bit more on the feeling side. Because I feel like AJ is book smart, but he's like not common sense smart, you know what I mean? And that's kind of how like I took AJ, because he's just like so boring. And I heard someone say it before, and I was like, no. And then I looked back on this episode when I was like trying to like go through like the PowerPoint, like go through like everything. Like, I have a PowerPoint for my notes, and I was like writing it in, going through the episode, making like pictures so that we understand the scene more. And I'm like, this guy is so boring. And I'm like, no, give him a chance. And then when I started like reading like what was going on in the scene, I was like, ooh, Joey, you could do better. Like, that's kind of how I took it. And so that was the last scene with her and AJ. But then we have the next scene, which is scene 6 of Pacey. And Andy sits next to Pacey, and she says, hey. And Pacey says, hey. And Andy says, you weren't exactly the life of the party tonight. And Pacey says, no, I guess I got a lot of stuff on my mind. And Andy says, yeah, it's too bad your parents couldn't come. Which, Andy, that's not what he has in mind. He has Joey in mind. And Pacey says, well, as it turns out, there's a lot of people couldn't make it. So do that news. Why did he randomly speak a different language? I don't understand. And Andy says, yeah, but I mean, too bad they couldn't see you being a star all tonight. And Pacey says, I think you and I both know who the real star of that production is. I mean, the actors, all we could do come on the last moment and grab our glory. We're about people who work behind the scenes. You guys are the people who make things actually happen. I mean, no one ever knows all the work that you guys do. And Andy says, they know, so looks like you're gonna have that guaranteed C in English. And Pacey says, you're not disappointed, are you? About the pack return to the deep stuff of economics monogrammy. And Andy says, I'm not disappointed. Girls have any idiotic guided notions about guys. I mean, we all spunk them up and turn them into something they're not. And I feel like she just kind of described what Joey was going through. Like, what she means by this is, like, we build something in our minds. Like, oh, this date is going to be so good. Like, this person's going to be so good. Like, blah-de-da-da-da. And you meet them, and you're like, who the heck are you? And also, I feel like what Andy's talking about is Pacey. Like, she builds this person up in her mind who Pacey really is, like from season 2. And she builds it up, and she builds it up, and she builds it up, and finally it just comes crashing down because Pacey is the person that she wants him to be. And so Pacey knows this, and Pacey says, in your defense, I wasn't exactly what you call luxury model. I did have the fixture upper all written all over me. And I feel like it's also his age. Like, you can't have this expectation of who they are at a certain age. Like, when I was 15, I thought I would, like, have, like, this guy for the rest of my life. Like, you can't do that. Like, you can't build someone up in your mind just because they look okay. Like, that's not how it works. And Andy says, yeah, you pretty much were subbed, weren't you? And Pacey says, yes, I was. Damaged goods. And Andy says, but the thing is, Pacey, I was wrong. There was never anything about you that needed fixing up, and there never was, and there never will be, because you were perfect as you are. And Pacey says, you too, Andy. And Andy sighs, and Pacey says, what? And Andy says, I'm trying. So, what do you think my next project should be? It definitely won't be involving you. Okay. And Pacey says no. And Andy says, my people will certainly not be calling your people. And Pacey says, I don't know. And Andy says, I was thinking maybe all girls cast. And Pacey says, or perhaps puppets. You know, puppets are really good. They're edible, unlike myself. Which, and I love this scene with them too, because you can just tell, like, them two have kind of moved on from where they were, like, almost 10 episodes ago. Like, it's different from where they were in season 3, episode 3, or season 2. Like, they have moved on and they have tried to figure it out. And I feel like with Andy doing this play, like, obviously she had to have Pacey in it, but it was one of those things where she really, like, got to, like, have that chance to move on and to be herself and do all that clever kind of stuff, which is kind of my favorite part about it. So then we have the last scene, which is scene 5 of Joey. Okay, scene 14 of this whole podcast episode. So we have scene where Joey is getting home, and Bessie stops her at the front door, and Bessie says, not so fast. A certain boy we both know is waiting for you. And I think, like, when she looks around, she, like, looks in the backyard to see who it is, and she might have thought it was Pacey or AJ. And so Dawson is sitting there on one of the benches, and Joey says, Dawson. And Dawson says, hey, sorry to show up like this. I know you just got back from your date, which you didn't know about the date until Pacey said something, I bet. And Joey says, look, if that's what this is about. And Dawson says, no, it's not, I swear. And Joey says, how do you know about my date anyway? And Dawson says, Pacey told me. You don't have to explain. If anyone has to explain, it's me showing up like this. And Joey says, so why did you show up like this? And Dawson says, I need to see you, you know? I just suddenly felt very lost. That's kind of creepy, not gonna lie. Like, I needed to see you. You're very lost. I needed to, like, okay, listen. And Joey says, how did you think you were going to feel after you took down all those posters and suddenly decided to drop film class? Like, she just said the obvious truth. And Dawson says, well, I didn't think, I just did. And Joey says, and you know you're thinking, and you realize you don't know what you're doing anymore. And Dawson says, something like that, yeah. And Joey says, I think you lost your true north, that fix in the sky that guides yourself by. And Dawson says, what about you? What's your north? And Joey says, I don't think I have one. And they look in the sky, and it's dancing with, like, fiery lights. And Dawson says, what is this? And Joey says, Northern Furnace. And Dawson says, Northern Lights? Aren't we too far in the south for this in Cape Side? Which was kind of my thought too. And Joey says, apparently not. It's funny, I have been waiting for this all night long, and it happens with you. And Dawson says, is that a bad thing? And Joey says, no, it's not typical. And they look back, and Joey says, I thought they would be more bluer than this. And that is the last part of this episode. So really, when you think about it, like, she says it's kind of typical, which it is. Like, when you think about it, like, her and Dawson, like, they're always with each other, and no matter what they do, like, somehow they always end up with each other talking about, like, certain things. But I really think it goes back to, like, how they were with each other and how everything just feels normal. And with her and Pacey, like, obviously things are, like, exciting. She doesn't know what's going to happen. With AJ, it's just, like, a bunch of knowledge stuff. And with Dawson, she knows what's going to happen. And for Pacey, it's not really like, I think, like, honestly, he never knows what's gonna happen with Joey. Like, obviously, him and Jen aren't a thing, so he can cut her out the picture. And with Andy, he never knows what's gonna happen. So, like, they're the polar opposite. And I feel like Joey's just always scared because she knows, like, Dawson is gonna be there in a certain type of way. And so for her to, like, really go back and understand, like, what really happened and that kind of stuff, it's kind of hard for Joey to really get, like, out of her comfort zone. And I feel like with Joey, it's kind of like she's always with her comfort zone with Dawson. Like, it's not like her and Dawson are some magical thing. It's just like her and Dawson are dealing with what her and Dawson have always gone through. And with Pacey, it's like he really wants to be with her, but how can he say that when Dawson is there? And for Dawson to come up after her date, I feel like he was kind of worried after what Pacey said earlier, but he wasn't worried until Pacey said something. And I feel like it goes back to what I said earlier, like, it's none of his business, but like when Pacey suddenly says something that he didn't know, he goes, oh, why didn't you tell me about this? And it's like, because first of all, it was none of your business, and second of all, you acted like you didn't know. And he goes, I feel lost. And he thinks that Joey's gonna be that person and no, but like, honestly, it's not that. It's just that life moves on and things happen, and finally Dawson has to go on with that aspect. And so does Joey. Like, she has to learn that high school and college are two different things. Obviously, she continues seeing AJ, but like, it's kind of different with that aspect. And with Pacey, like, he has to learn that high school, like, things, people move on, people continue moving on. He has to figure out what his thing will be with Joey. And so basically, at the end of this episode, we basically see Pacey really jealous throughout this episode, and Joey just kind of figuring out AJ, and Dawson just being Dawson. And that kind of just leads to this, and it's just kind of fun to me, because I'm like, alright, we have another aspect that we did not learn last episode. So, if you like this episode, please make sure to subscribe on the YouTube channel. That's Jacey's Creek Podcast, where I post every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. There's also other platforms that you can listen to, such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure to review this podcast with kind words, please, only. Make sure you comment, subscribe, share, whatever you need to do. And also, you can catch every episode again on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I would love to hear your thoughts on Instagram. That's Witter and Potter. And my TikTok is Pacey and Joey. I hope to see you guys again at Friday and Saturday and Sunday. I love hearing your guys' thoughts, so please, 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 please make sure to comment down below. Bye, guys.